One of our subscribers asked that we do ocean waves in watercolor. Well, there's nobody who did ocean waves in watercolor any better than Anita Engel. So we're going to steal a little bit from Anita and have some fun. If you're a watercolor painter and you don't know Anita Engel's work, you might find it a whole lot of fun to get familiar with it. Unfortunately, she didn't do any YouTube videos. She did very few videos except when she did workshops. But you can still search for Anita Engel, N-I-T-A-E-N-G-L-E, in YouTube and find where people have stolen from her workshops and put some of her videos online. She experimented with watercolor. She had a really wonderful skill in drawing, and she had a wonderful skill in classical or the traditional method of watercolor methods of painting. But she found that she let the watercolor paint itself. That was her thing. And so we're going to take that approach because there's so many ways you can do ocean waves. So I'm going to take that approach, and we're going to experiment just a little bit with part of Nita's method and part of my twist on Nita's method, and show you one way that you can go about doing ocean waves, and you might find you might use this little playful technique, a combination of techniques to do other things too. So where we start? Well, we're going to start with a reference, although we're not going to stick to the reference. This is a reference of ocean waves. Now what we observe, first of all, what colors do we need to pull out? We see really two major colors in here. We see blues that lean more towards violet, really, in these very, very dark areas, and then we see blues that are leaning more towards green. So we have kind of a deep blue violet to a lighter blue green. Those blue greens show through more with the sunlight there. The blue violets are falling more into shadow. So we got that information we can work with, and that tells us what colors to put out on the palette. And of course, if you're familiar with Nita, you know she took a different approach than that. But this is my approach, my twist on Nita. So I have on my palette the Holbein Viridian Tint, which I really enjoy for when I need to work with blue greens or greens that really lean towards blue. So I'm going to pull out a good healthy amount. Now this is one thing that you'll find because we're using lots of water, so we're going to need lots of really thick, rich color on the palette. So for just those blue greens, you can see on the palette, you see how this leans towards that blue green. Now another color I'm going to pull out is Antwerp Blue, so Winsor Newton Antwerp Blue, and that's because this is more of a bluish green, and Antwerp Blue is more of a greenish blue, and you'll see that when I pull them down. You see them side by side there. You can see how mixtures of those two are pretty much what we're seeing in this photograph. Now we'll pull out one more color, and that is the Carbazole Violet. And the reason for that is that'll give us that deep shadow that we see in those deep blues there. So I'll just pull out a good amount of Carbazole. I'm going to pull it over here on this side of the palette. The Carbazole Violet is a very, very rich and very high tinting strength color. So I want to put it kind of separate from those two. So those are the colors I'm going to use. Now a little bit of prep work. I'm going to use masking fluid here, but I'm going to use masking fluid in such a way that it doesn't, the edges are not hard and awful like a lot of masking fluids will do. Now, the PBO Drawing Gum is about the best masking fluid I've found for working this way, where the water goes on. You can see it when you put it down. It gives us a nice clean lift when we lift it. So this is PBO Drawing Gum. Now what I'm going to do here, first of all, I'm going to cover up part of this. Let's use another sheet of paper to cover that up. Part of the photograph, because we want this to be a quick tip not a 2-hour painting. So brace yourself for that. But I'm just going to use a portion of this to show you the technique, show you the approach, and I'll do just enough so that you can play with it then and make these things happen for you. So I'm going to pull the PBO drawing gum. I'm going to pour a little bit of it into a little container here so I can have it flat in the container. This PBO drawing gum, it's a good thing you saw that, does have a tendency to sometimes get little dried clots in it, and so when that happens, what it's wise to do is just pull those out. I'll try to mix them up first. There we go. That will dissolve, so I don't have to pull it out. I just want that PBO drawing gum, just enough of it in the bottom of that container so I can work with it. And one thing to be cautious about when you're using this is to keep that cap on it, because the stuff does dry up fast. So there we go. Now I've got that ready. Let's do a little bit of drawing, kind of place this stuff so we can at least have a plan. And also I want to kind of limit the size of it so that this doesn't go on forever and ever and ever. So this is sort of a format that I'll be working with right here, sort of like that. Now we can see that the major shapes that we're looking at in this reference, let's pull this a little bit closer right in here. The major shapes that we're working with here, the one large shape here, and then we see the major shape. Now this is another thing, this is important when you're working ocean waves, that you are able to see the whole scene as just a few large shapes first, because it's in those large shapes that things take place. So we have behind that break, that wave, we have that dark area of water that's sort of in shadow. And so I'm going to start that. I don't want to start it right in the center here. I want to start a little bit higher, about right here. I'm just going to make a very light mark. Now pencil marks will go away when you're doing watercolor. So you don't have to worry. And if they don't go away, if they're obscuring, you can always take a soft eraser and erase them after the watercolor is dry. So just want that major shape, sort of similar to what we see here. Now I see another shape. I see where the wave is breaking as that splash of water comes down here. I'm seeing that, and then I'm seeing the actual break in the wave itself. So we're seeing kind of division of shadow and light right here. So that is important to capture, where that vision is and how far out does it go. That foam goes out about right there, so we'll take that into consideration. Now we'll call this right here all one shape, even though it divides itself into many little subshapes. Well, actually, we could say too, I'm going to disregard the sand here for the sake of time, but we can see a little bubble flows of these little things, whatever they're called, foams, going in this direction right here. So I'm just going to let that form itself. Now remember what Anita said, let the watercolor paint itself. We do a little bit of planning, and then we let the water and let the water and the color paint itself. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to mask out where I see those whitest areas there. I'm not sure when I'm doing any masking down here. I might want to let that happen with the process I'm going to use, not quite sure. But instead of using a brush, I'm going to use paper towel here. And you'll see what I'm doing. I'm going to make a brush out of this paper towel, and I just kind of randomly shape that paper towel in just random little shapes here that have ragged edges, and lightly coat just those edges, lightly coat them with the PBO. Let's get it excess off here, and just give this very light little touch. And you see how we get those nice little, just by doing it this way, we can get those nice little splashes that would go up into the water, and the splashes of water that we see in front of that of the background. But we want to have ragged edges. We see this has ragged edges, so we want all these little pieces that we put in here to have ragged edges, and that's one reason for using this rather than a brush, because it's difficult to get that kind of effect with a brush. So we could just do that sort of thing and just create those little splashes up in the water. And then I'm going to bring it on down and get a little bit more of that going on right down here like this. And I'm going to actually need a kind of a good amount of it right in here. And so I want some more of those little splashes up in the, get those a little bit more ragged. Those are more ragged. I can use the edge of the paper towel right there and kind of sweep that, see, and I can get that stuff more ragged like that. There we go. Alright, let's see. I'm just kind of using this as my guide. What's happening here is my guide. Sort of letting it go where it wants to go. You can't use a whole lot of control here and have it remain spontaneous, because that masking fluid does give you those hard edges, and that's what I really object to with using masking fluid. So I very rarely use it in watercolor unless I need something special like this to happen. Now, so we got those nice and those lights nice and masked out. I think maybe I will go ahead and just very carefully come down to this bottom edge I'm seeing here and just give this a little bit of, just a little motion back and forth with my hand. Barely touch that paper, because I want those edges to stay ragged. Unlike masking fluid really wants to do. I want those edges to stay ragged. And let me use this movement in here to shape those lights, those very light lights I'm looking at. Just let's use this movement here just to shape them. And here, by doing this, we can develop that pattern of light we see in those waves. See, now they are connected, so I do want to be sure I have them connected. So you sort of have to see backwards here, because we're putting dark down where the light should be. And that's one of the advantages I like about this PBO, is that you can see it. A lot of those masking fluids come in lighter. They don't have these any color in them, so you put it down, you can't really see where it's going. But because of the nature of this stuff, you just have to feel that what you're doing is putting light in. And I'm so influenced by the value of everything that sometimes I have to really always remind myself that what I'm seeing or what I'm putting in there is light. So I'm just moving. I'm using or looking at just the direction of those lights, and I'm more or less just drawing by using motion of my hand and just barely touching the paper with this PBO. So get just enough of that now, so it's going to make a pattern that's very similar to the pattern we see right there. So that will be our first move there. Now, the next thing is the hardest part, is that PBO has to be absolutely dry. So we have to wait now just a little bit. Most of it's already dry. If you do it really thin, it will dry much faster. But if it piles up, it takes it just a little while to dry. So we'll give it just a moment here to dry. Alright, so this is dry enough to touch. Now you have to be sure of that. All that PBO is dry enough to touch. Now the next thing I'm going to do is really a neat thing, and that is where we're going to play with some splattering of water and paint. So we'll do that now, and I'll just use, now here, this is a coarse sprayer. I have it set, let's see if I can show you, that when I have it set so that it's on spray. I have it pulled back. This particular kind style of sprayer allows it to go, the water go in a stream or in a spray. But you see, I have it as far back as it will go in a spray. The Windex bottles were Nita's favorite bottles for the spray, because they gave a nice pattern of spray that she enjoyed working with. But I found that this particular one works really good for that. So you see that pattern of spray that we want. That's going to enable us to get something of the feeling of splashing water in addition to this. So what we'll do here, and we'll just go wild. Now, so what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm just going to give this thing, the whole thing, a good spraying and see what happens. And here's where you lose control. You don't have very much control at all, so you don't try to have control. Then we're going to get a brush, a relatively large round brush, and lots of water in the brush. And I'm going to go over, and I'm just sort of looking at these colors right here. So I'm just going to pick up colors on that brush, and here's what we're going to do. We're just going to drop them in where we see these droplets of water. Let's get just a little bit more variation in color there. Where we see these little drops of water, just drop the water in to the tops of those little puddles of water. Drop it in, just randomly. You can, in fact, you could be more random than that, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Let's just go ahead and do some dropping in up here where the PBO is. And so we're working right here in this area where the light's hitting it the strongest, and so just kind of drop those in, and you can use your reference if you want to kind of guide where you put that stuff, but just dropping it into the drops of water and letting it have its way. Let it go where it wants to go. Let's get a little bit more variation in color. I like getting variation in those colors there, because that gives us the variation that nature gives us. So we'll just do that. Now I'm going to come on down in here. I'm going to do more of it down here, where I'm going to get a little bit more of that violet into that meridian tint. Let's get some going down here. And these, I think I'm just going to give it let just the tip of the brush move in a kind of a horizontal direction, or you move in a direction of the pattern that I see all this going on right in here. Let's put that a little bit richer. And let's make it a little bit darker right in here. And see, now this is not going to be, it never is, and wasn't for Anita, it's not going to be an exact interpretation or exact images we're seeing here. It's going to be an interpretation of that image, or that's one way to say it. And let's get this a little bit warmer, just a little bit there, and let it go out like this, come down just a little bit more like that, and just sort of play with it. Now she was a lot freer than I'm being, but I told you this is me stealing from her. A lot of people steal from her and don't give her credit, but I think she deserves the credit. Alright, so we can continue that, and let's get a little bit darker here, 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 and here. Now while we're doing that, okay, let's get this done. While we're doing that, let's let it be lighter over there. We can go into the background there. There we go. You see it's beginning to do its thing there. Now we can go in the background here while this is moving around. You can, Anita did a lot of this what I'm doing right now, where she moved the paper and let the paint kind of flow around, and see how nicely that works. That gives us some of those variations we're seeing in there. So I'll do a little bit of that. You could actually go wild with that part of it if you wanted to. So, and you could actually, if you wanted to control the volume more, and you wanted this to be lighter up here, you could just sort of tilt it down like this, and lift color up. So let's just sort of see what happens there. I'm going to leave it like that. Then, while this is doing its thing, I'm going to move up in here and begin to do some of this stuff. Now, first of all, I'll start out with the lighter portions of that I'm seeing, and that is that lighter blue-green. I've got lots of water down there already, and I want that, if I want that to stay relatively light, I will have less water on the palette here. So I'm looking at the pattern here, and the palette pattern here is doing something like that, and so I'm sort of ignoring the water that's there, just using that water for its wetness, not so much for its pattern, until I get down, come on down into where I had the masking fluid. And now we can begin to see the advantage of having that masking fluid there. It's going to guard our white space, our white paper. It's going to help us to retain the white paper. I'm actually going to bring some of that darker color down into the masking fluid area so that it will give us that pattern. But I want to keep my arm moving in the direction I see these this background water up here, and just bring it on down to right up here. And so begin to see the masking fluid resisting some of those areas right in there. Now I'm going to go into the violet, just the violet in the Viridian. I need less water on the brush. So I'll blot the brush really, really good. I go deep into the Viridian and then deep into the Carbazole Violet there. And that gives me a nice, rich, dark blue. Isn't that interesting? Purple plus green equals blue. It's because they both have a lot of blue in them, and there's just enough yellow in that green to give it, to lose some of its saturation, cause it to lose some of its saturation, which is great. Now we can get very dark back here, just like that, where it's still damp. It will blend in. Let's do that some more, get some more of that. I'm going to get a good bit more of that Viridian tint in there. And we'll just pull that violet into the Viridian tint until I see it. You work in watercolor, you can push it against the palette and see the color that you have. And see, I want it to stay, I don't want it to turn violet. I want it to stay that deep, rich blue, sort of low saturation, dark blue. And then I'm going to just use my movement of the round brush point back and forth like this. Pull it back and forth like this. And like that. And look at the pattern. Let's get some of that going on right down here. Look at that pattern of dark that I'm seeing here. And by observing that pattern, where the dark's in the pattern, dark, 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 and then with the lighter colors in the pattern, we avoid them because we already have them down there. And let's see, come over here, that really is very, very dark. You can see this is what watercolor does. If there's too much water there, it acts as white, it turns it lighter. So we control watercolor. Water plays a large role in controlling the values of watercolor. So let me work in the color again on the palette over here to be sure to keep that nice, rich, dark, deep blue. And let's pull it here. Oh, I like that light over there. Let's just leave that there. And let's see, we do need some darker, some of that darker blue right back here. So we need that to be very dramatic back there. Pull it on down. Now let's see what has happened there. Okay, so we need, according to what we're seeing here, this part right here is moving in this direction. So we can begin to do, this is more control than Nita used, but as I told you, I'm lifting from her in some ways and interpreting. So if you could just drag the brush, that's still kind of, that has some dry areas in there. You just move the brush in the direction you see it going and just sort of drag it over the surface. You can begin to get some of that movement. It was wetter there than I realized it was, and so it lost the pattern there, but I can get that pattern back if I want it. If I don't want it, I don't have to. So what we're going to have right over here, if we need some darker shadow color of water against this wave right here, and we want it to blend. We want this to blend right up in there. So in order for it to blend, I need to get just a little bit wetter. I'm going to reach for another brush dipped in water here and get this a little, just smooth out the wetness in this. You see, when I smooth that wetness out with the color that's there, it gives us a smooth texture. Alright, so now I'm going to go in here. Now that that's wet, this should be very, very smooth. It should go very nicely. And get that deep, rich blue from those colors I'm seeing here. Right up against that PBO. You see, I'm right up against the PBO, holding the brush at a slight angle, moves in this direction. I can get that. I can get what I'm seeing there. Okay. Now, as it's going further up, you can begin to see we get the sense of ocean waves here. Now, if we want to control any of the other colors, we could, but sometimes it's best to let the painting give you what it's giving you and not fight with it. the one thing I always look for is balance, and this seems to all be moving in this direction. So I want to establish a little bit more movement going kind of in a counter direction there, so that the whole, this is just not painting, but it would be if I were doing this for real. So I want to balance that. And so since this is one thing we need to watch for, no matter when we're doing watercolor or oil, it doesn't matter what, it doesn't have anything to do with the medium. It is something that belongs to all painting, and that is balance, the direction. So everything seems to be going this way. This is, in watercolor, we have to watch how wet it is, because if we put it down too wet, in an area that's already wet, we might get back runs. But I want to create a movement that's moving in that counter direction right there, more in this direction. That helps some. Okay, that helps some to create that kind of feeling of this would be a wave, a breaker coming right there. And let's get this very little water in that brush and get a little bit more of this. Let's see where else done. Then still have that strong move. This helps a little bit there, but let's see if we can't counter that. I need something moving in this direction right here, so I think I'll go up like that with this and get that and get a little bit more of an counter angle moving in that direction there. And actually, I think that interpret that better. This is still going too much in that angle there, so I'm going to just cut some of the angle and get more of a horizontal feeling right there. And you can see now it's beginning to feel more imbalanced. A little bit more of that. Could probably stand some more, but this is about the technique. But I am so attuned to how the visual principles, the composing principles work, that can't stand when something goes out of whack, even though I might just be showing you technique. I'm going to show you just a little bit more. We're going to get this right here. Now, this has begun to dry a little bit, and I want to get that just a little bit more dark there for composing, for the composing part. Okay, so I think maybe right now would be a good time to stop and let all of this dry. So I'll need to put this under a hair dryer, which I don't want to take time to show you. You don't want to sit there and listen to a hair dryer running. So what we're going to do, we're going to let this dry, going to put it in the hair dryer, get it absolutely dry, and then we'll come back and show you how we can wrap it up. Okay, so let's see what we've got now. We've got it all dry. Have this this pickup here that was designed for lifting masking fluid off. I know you can find these at Cheap Joe's and Jerry's. I'm not sure where else, but anyway. So what we'll do is first of all we'll take away all that PBO. You see what we got. So we do it very gently. We don't rush this, because if we rush it too hard, we'll pull off some of the paint too. So don't want that to happen. If you dig in too deep with this, you can leave your evidence behind. Now, you see what I mean by the masking fluid does leave a little bit of harshness, even when you take precautions such as using the paper towel that I used for your creation of pattern. But now we can see potential already. I can see potential for developing this into a painting. Now, here's the thing though, when you use these techniques, you're only halfway home right here. From this point, we can move into regular watercolor techniques and begin to add and maybe even subtract in areas where we want to subtract until we get what we want, till we get that feeling of ocean waves. Now let me show you about subtraction. A good sharp X-Acto knife. You see this edge right here. That edge turned out to be a little bit harsh for a wave, so I could just take an X-Acto knife and loosen that edge up just a little bit and get that more natural looking. Don't want to be careful with this, because everywhere I use the X-Acto knife, I can't paint back over. So don't want to overdo that kind of thing, but that was the only one I found that was, this one's kind of hard right there, but I'm going to leave that for a moment. I'm just going to show you just a little bit. Now, Anita Engel used to say in her workshops, when she brought it to this point, she would say, now you go and shape it into the way you want it to be. She would usually have a painting already done where she could show what the outcome was. I'll show you just enough here to show you how to develop this now into ocean waves. And we can see potential here. So using the same colors as we have on the palette, we can find places where we would like to see something else happen other than what happened here. And one thing I would like to see happen right here, I'd like to see this part feel more in front of what's behind. So the way I'll do that is I'll turn this around like this. Let me see the reference here. This is where you really refer back to the reference. And once again, the object is not to try to get it just like the reference, but to get the characteristics. So what I'd like to see here is I'd like this little portion right here to be darker. You see right here it's much darker. So what I'll do, I'm going to carefully wet behind it right here so that can flow in, so the water can flow in. So just very carefully wet there. And then I'll go in and pick up the same colors, the Viridian Tint and the Carbazole Violet. And I want the dark, nice, rich and dark, not much water at all, just wet enough to manipulate the paint. And what I'll do here now, when you watch how this will fall behind that when I do this. I'll just put an edge right there, and let's make it just a little less hard, and just pull that right into here, and then we'll just lay the brush flatter and pull it, let the paint flow into that. So the paint just sort of gradates into that shape right there. I can bring it on around, and let's see how far do I want that to go behind. I can even do this around, very carefully, kind of a stipple motion. Do this around that white edge, this white where I had the masking fluid. I want to close in that masking fluid a little bit there. I can use kind of a stippling motion. Just kind of stipple the end of the brush and close that in, make it a little bit finer, a little bit more like a splash right there. And then I can come on behind, and this too will help that feeling of that I was complaining about the strong diagonal that was moving in this direction. Now I can come on for as far as I want to. I want this right up in here. Let's see, we're right up in here where these splashes, and you see they work very nicely. They go up here. I want them to feel just a little bit more like these are a part of the background. So I'll just make that a little darker just by using a little bit of a stippling motion right in here. And you can see how if I continue this process of creating or getting that feeling that this is behind this, then we're talking a lot more time. And so I don't want to, I'll get that a little bit more horizontal. I don't want to take that time, just want to show you just enough. And I can come over here and kind of continue that line right over here like we see it right here. This didn't come out quite as dark over here, so I'll adjust it and just get that continuous feeling of the darker part, the part of the ocean that's not breaking behind the part of the ocean that is breaking. I can take that down, do anything I want to with it, and by having a little bit more water, I'm wetting the brush again, and I'm going to pull it against my pad there to dry it. Pick up just on the tip of the brush that very dark paint, and then lay it down so that the brush itself blends into that area. So you can see I'm not going to do more there, just give you the process and show you how that works. And now you can do the same, follow that same process. See how much more together that begins to come. We can do that same process throughout any of these areas where we want something to feel like it's gradating in, like we need this darker right in here. We'll do the same thing up in there. Now the one other thing that we can do, where we see those areas feeling so harsh in there, we can give them a little bit more feeling of form. So I'll go into this very light area here where the paint and the water have dried, right in this area right here. The paint and water have dried, they create a light value. So I'll just pick up a light value here, and let's see, do I need that wet before going? I don't know. Well, anyway, so just, and that may be a little dark, so I add more water. And then once again, I will let that gradate out, so I can just do this sort of thing and get that harshness knocked down in there and keep working there. So see, we can work those values so that they so that the white areas that we left are not so harsh. In other words, we develop in these white areas that are left, we develop the feeling of form of those things where it's in light, it's splashing in the splashing light, but we do see a little bit more value difference in there, perhaps right here too, especially in this little area right in here. And so I'm going to wet that entire area. So I'll just wet it very lightly here so I don't move that paint behind it. And then we can throw, see what I have over here is a very light color of this right here. So I'll just throw that in. You see that we'll begin to lighten that up. So I hope this gives you enough handle on one way, in a really fun way, to create ocean waves. So if you really enjoy that process and what it can do, and then let it have its way on your paper with your techniques, and let it get good and dry, put it under the hair dryer, absolutely good and dry, and then you go back with your own techniques and shape what you have there into ocean waves. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DyingMinds.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.